the edited version, and you can decide, I mean, you can totally help me decide what to put up.
Okay.
Here we are. And yeah, so we don't have to worry about being all too formal because we can edit things out if we feel
Good.
like
I'm
cursing.
likely to say something inappropriate, so.
Not me, not me. Okay, well, cool. Yeah, so I just had those questions because I thought it would guide us. And so I've been thinking about how to do this, and um, I thought now that I thought more of it after I wrote these questions, I thought maybe half like like the story, the journey of how you became a scientist or whatever interest, and then maybe a little bit about how your life is as a scientist and was it kind of what you thought, and then just how you're doing in science and what exactly you do. But we'll do that at the end, I think. But I think these questions will get us through that.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I'm just basically going to read off of here, but let's start briefly with your current work, and that way you can kind of set the table for where you are now and your family life and how all that plays into what you're doing, and then we'll go backwards unless you start from the beginning. So yeah, how is Fort Worth, and how's your new?
Yeah, Fort Worth is great. So I currently work for the TCU and UNT HSC School of Medicine. So this is a joint effort between two universities to create one medical school. So that's interesting and unique. I have worked at two other medical schools previously, both either brand new or pretty new. The first one was Rocky Vista University, and I'll tell you a little bit about how I got there in a moment because I think it's funny, the story of how, you envision that you set out on this journey in life and that you're taking all these steps in a purposeful direction, and that's not really the case. Once you become a professional adult, you look back and realize that, I've got this great CV, but I didn't intend to build it this way, really. I think that's a big life lesson that comes slowly over time. But yeah, I started off at Rocky Vista University. Someone took a chance on me and let me teach. I decided to go into teaching because I really wasn't happy at the bench. I think that I probably could have succeeded at the bench. I probably could have succeeded at whatever I tried, but it just wasn't fulfilling for me. I enjoy the personal interaction that teaching brings. I like to interact with adults. I like to help other adults solve problems, which makes me a good lab mate, but not necessarily principal investigator.
Right.
um, so I started off at RVU, and then I had I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that's a really good point that you bring up. That we learn a lot of in graduate school. We learn a lot of different skills, and you were a person that excelled in all of them. But you did sort of follow the energy and in your interest, I guess, however you want to put it. And as far as I could tell, you've been very successful and happy. So there's a plug for kind of going with your interest and your
With
gut.
your
So.
gut. Yeah, and I specifically remember in grad school at one point we had a departmental retreat for the immunology department. I got included in that retreat. We went to Oklahoma to an overnight camp or something, and staying up with some of the other grad students and faculty, and mentioning to some of the faculty that I thought maybe I didn't want to work at the bench, and them really expressing some serious disappointment, essentially telling me that I wouldn't be a real scientist. So it was a struggle. I mean, I think the reason it was a struggle is because I was worried of what people would think if I left, not really about my needs, but more so what they would think. And I think you deal with that, professional life all the time. But I did choose to go into teaching. Looking back, that was the obvious choice because every extracurricular activity I did, every free minute, it was teaching, right? I oversaw our graduate council, our student government. I tutored medical students. I did every teaching fellowship they allowed me to do. So obviously I really liked it. I think that's an important thing to look at when you're in college or in high school trying to decide what you want to do. Look at where you choose your extracurricular activities, to be, because that may really give you some indication as to what you really would, I don't know, feel happy doing,
Right.
So I ended up at RVU because of that, because Carla Lee had noticed all of my successful teaching experiences and given me a good reference to the TCOM dean who moved to Rocky Vista University, and he took me with him without a postdoc. He gave me a teaching job.
And Carla Lee, she was like an executive administrative assistant kind of. I don't remember her title.
A student coordinator, maybe, for the graduate school. Yeah, so she worked with us, trying to fulfill our degree plans and overseeing the student government and things like that. So, yeah.
So you never really know where you're going to get your help because your guidance to the next step.
Oh yeah, I mean, I didn't think that she would have that big an influence over my life for sure, but she did. I went to pick up my diploma and she handed me a slip of paper, and it had Bruce Steuben's phone number on it, and so I called and applied for the job, and they gave me a chance. It definitely was a smaller school, not where you might envision you would be acting as a university professor, as standalone College of Osteopathic Medicine, in the middle of nowhere in the suburb of Denver. But
you could do worse.
That was where I could get my foot in the door. And actually, I had a lot of fun there. Whenever I left, I didn't really realize how much autonomy I actually had as a teacher there because of that relaxed style. I think that, because no one's watching, they're not trying to compete with the ivory tower institutions. They're allowing us to try things and innovate. So that was good. But yeah, then so from Rocky Vista, I got married when I moved to Colorado to my husband, Michael. He's not in science. Yeah, you remember that. You were there. He's not in science. I think for me that's important because I'm kind of a competitive person. I'm not sure that it would have been best for me to be with another scientist, which is interesting because I think you could probably have great conversations, right? And we have great conversations, Michael and I do. I get to talk to him about science.
Hold on 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just maybe 30 seconds, like right after you said that you were competitive, it kind of broke up. So maybe just repeat that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Michael and I met actually in high school, so well before grad school. So he's not a scientist. He decided on a different path, and I tend to think that maybe it would have been a bad idea for me to be with a scientist or someone in a similar profession because I'm quite competitive, right? And we get to come home and tell each other stories and share things and have great conversations, but there's no competition in it, right? We're just each other's biggest fan, really. So I think it's nice that he's not in science, that I can turn that off sometimes when I get home.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. But yeah, we had a son 3 years ago, and we were in Colorado. So that was my first child, probably my only child, and we decided we wanted to come home to Texas at that point. So that's when I started to apply for other positions to try to get closer to home. And since then, I moved to San Antonio to work at the University of the Incarnate Word. It was another school of osteopathic medicine, brand new program there. And that experience actually allowed me to come to this position because they were looking for someone with curriculum development experience. So now I work for TCU, which is a huge, really prestigious university, which is amazing. And for my alma mater, UNT Health Science Center. Right now, I'm office in the same building that I did my, research for my dissertation. So.
Oh, wow.
That's wild. Yeah. I'm in EAD on the second floor right now. But it's a temporary office. But.
Okay. Do you know, just as an off subject, do you know where most of the classes will be taught? Will they be on the TCU campus or both?
No, they'll be both, but we're actually getting a new building here. You know how you walk down the hill to CBH, past the parking garage? Well, the parking garage is on one side of that like alley. On the other side, they tore down all those facility buildings and they built a new, I think it's 5 or 6 story building, and that's where we'll be housed. So we'll have some classes on Monday mornings. We'll be at TCU, but then the rest of the week we'll be here.
Nice.
Yep.
Okay. It's all very exciting. I know they've been talking about that, I don't know, since we were in grad school.
Seriously.
So, it's kind of great it happened.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm just going to go through the next one. Yeah, can we talk a little bit about how your childhood was? I know your sister and I know your parents a little bit, but kind of set the stage for the people listening.
So I grew up in Wichita Falls, Texas, which is one of those places where like a surprising number of people know it because it's so close to DFW. You drive through it. It's an Air Force town. There's also a college there. It's like a D2 size college, about 100,000 people. So it's a city. It's not a small town, but it's a city that kind of exists on its own away from a major metropolitan area. So it feels like a small town for sure. So growing up there, I would say I had a very happy childhood. Definitely, my family struggled a little bit financially. We were middle class, but sometimes we did, have things happen that put us in a financial situation where, bills didn't get paid or something like that. So I definitely don't want to lead anyone to believe that we were destitute or poor, by poverty standards, but I got to see some struggle, nonetheless, I think my parents probably gave me everything they possibly could, right? Sometimes to the detriment of the family, I would say, when I needed to play club soccer and, the electric bill in Texas in the summer can be $400 in a month, so choices have to be made sometimes. But definitely happy. My parents are still married, which is quite the accomplishment. I'm proud of that. They have been married their entire adult lives. I have one sister. She is like 22 months younger than me, so not even 2 years. So everything I did, she did until we were adults, and then she decided to just completely say, no, I don't want to be like you at all, which is good because she's a genius. She became an ICU nurse, and it took her a little while to get to that point. She actually got 2 different bachelor's degrees before she figured out what she wanted to do. But yeah, she's a charge nurse now in ICU. She keeps people alive all night long, and it's terribly difficult for me to understand even, as a biomedical scientist, what she does, but.
Terribly important work as well. My mother was an ICU nurse as well, so I completely relate. And I guess sometimes it just takes some of us longer to figure out what we want to do, but then when you find it, it feels good.
Yeah. So my mother is a nurse too. So when I was growing up, my mom actually got her LVN around the time I was born. So she was an LVN throughout my childhood until I was in like 6th grade, I think. She decided to go back to college, and she got her BSN. I think she graduated when I was in junior high. I remember going to her graduation, the whole family going to graduation. She was actually the first person in our family lineage, on her side of the family, or on my father's side of the family, to get a bachelor's degree. The one other person that had done that is my grandmother's sister. So my great aunt, Martha, she also had her bachelor's degree and later got a master's in education. She was a principal. She recently retired, but she was a principal for most of her life. So she was a real big role model for me growing up too. She lived pretty far away, so I probably idolized her, in ways that maybe weren't realistic too. But she was a strong, independent female role model who was educated and had powerful positions in education, so I definitely want to be like Aunt Martha too. Yeah.
Right. It sounds like you have a history of strong, progressive, sort of achieving, goal-oriented sort of women in your family.
Definitely. Yeah. I would say that on both sides of my family, women are just very opinionated and almost stereotypically so, right?
You you don't say.
That's kind of the joke is that all the women do run the show. And that's been that way as far as I know, for generations. And we actually don't have that many men in my family. There's actually a lot of women in my family. Like I said, in my immediate family, it's my mom and my sister and me, and then my dad. So he was all alone. I was his only son growing up. So I had to hold the flashlight and the screwdriver and climb up on roofs and all that. He's a carpenter, so he got a GED. He didn't go to college, but he worked very hard during my childhood. I think it is catching up with him a little bit now. Now that he's a little older, he's definitely more achy. It's harder to get up in the morning. And that's something that I didn't anticipate having to watch, you know.
Yes, yes. As we get older, they get older too. It's
Hmm.
tough. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's great. Let me see one of these other questions we have here. Yeah. Well, it was. I mean, you're a scientist, and your mom was a nurse,
Hmm.
and I mean that's uh, very laudable. And an ICU nurse, I guess that's your sister. But um, where did the science? When did you see the
Yeah.
scientist in you? You know, like, what were you imagining? Yeah, what sort of sparked that?
That's a good question. I think it evolved a lot over time. I don't remember ever being interested in anything else but science. Like the earliest I can remember, I wanted to be a veterinarian, right? That was like the first job I wanted, you know. And then that kind of evolved into wanting to be a physician. And I think that those professions, they're really attractive to kids, right? They're like the only things they really know about. It's obvious, or it feels like it's obvious what that person does on a daily basis. They take care of animals or they take care of people. So I think that those are probably pretty common things that we're interested in when we're interested in science, as a kid. So I think that I always thought I would go into medicine at some level. That was just the idea. And maybe, you know, partially influenced by seeing my mother, you know, practice as a nurse and then go to college and, uh, she was a nurse and then my her great grandmother was also a nurse. So we had some history of nursing in our family. Um, Definitely when I was little, I was spoiled in the fact that my parents would constantly tell me how smart I was and how I could do everything. So I guess my grand idea was, well, I want to, take care of people, but I'll just take it to the next level and I'll become a physician, right? So I did that, or I planned on doing that, up until really like two aha moments, I think, for me. One was when I had to do my volunteerism in undergrad to get, my CV ready for applying to medical school. So I volunteered in the hospital. It was called Phase 2 Recovery at Wichita General. Um, I took care of people who had had surgery, outpatient surgery, so they were just going to go home. They weren't admitted, so they didn't get a room. They just got to sit in like a recliner, and I'd bring them a blanket and juice and cookies, and I just did not like the hospital. It felt dirty to me. It just wasn't a pleasant place to be. People weren't pleasant. They were in pain and they were unhappy and they weren't nice to me. And, I guess I hadn't ever really seen what healthcare is really like until that moment. And it's not all pleasant for sure. I'm sure the majority of it is not pleasant. So that was one moment that made me reconsider, becoming a physician. And then I think the other moment was my first course in undergrad, my first biology course, that I realized that I had a real talent or knack for mechanisms of disease. That first biology course, Biology 1, I think I made 100 in the course. Like, and then I had a couple of professors telling me, oh, you need to get a PhD, and like they do. Now that I've experienced working with, faculty in college, I realize that it's a really fun thing to do when you find a student who appears to have a gift or, can do it, to start to encourage them to enter the PhD club. But at the time, I didn't know that that's what, was happening to me. But yeah, they started to reach out and impress it upon me.
Even though the rest of the students in the class likely were not so happy with you destroying any curve possible.
Oh, yeah. But I was already used to that by the time I was in college.
Fair enough.
Yeah. And then I took a genetics course, and that even really solidified it. My genetics professor, Dr. Scales, he encouraged me to take developmental biology, which was more signaling, and I just love signaling. Like, the cause and effect nature, I don't know, it just jives with me. I think it makes me think about, the show The Magic School Bus. Mm-hmm. How they would go inside the human body and see things from the inside. I feel like now I've had so much training, right? But I feel like I can see inside of cells, and that's fun. I love to live in that place, but.
Yeah. Well, I think that's one of the reasons that you and I are really good friends, because for me it was cell biology that I had that sort of aha moment. But I just wanted to say that both of your aha moments, and especially the first one, really is a plug to try different things, right? And just, even if you think you like something, or maybe even if you think you would hate something, it may be worth giving it a shot, or at least talking to somebody that does it, because what you think you like may not, practically, it may not suit you long term.
Yeah. And I think it's really hard for college students to come to the realization that they don't want to go to medical school. Like, that's a huge step, because you've been building towards it your whole life. Your family has expectations, and you feel like if you don't do it, then people from the outside just think that you can't do it, And for me, it's really hard when I have to give up proving to someone that I can do something,
Right.
That's really hard to give up. But now looking back, I don't think I would have been happy in that career at all. Even if I had chosen to work somewhere outside of the hospital, it just doesn't allow the flexibility of time that I really need, I don't want to work 50 hours a week.
Right.
I want to be able to attend everything my son does, and I want to, take days off just because.
Yeah. Well, in the medical field, it's evolving, and I think it's even changed since we were kids, as far as there are a few specialties that are still very prestigious, but a lot of them, it's a lot of hard work, as you say, and you're not necessarily making $1 million a year or spending much time with your family.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, that's good. Yeah, so it was in undergrad, basically, when you kind of decided, I guess, when you just kind of covered that. So you didn't really have those ambitions in high school, maybe, sort of was developing.
Yeah.
Let me see. Oh, I wanted to ask you, one big thing about that I always admired is that you were able to excel, but you also had a practical side and an athletic side, right? Mm-hmm. So you played college sports, and I remember I don't know that we were very good friends at this time, but I think we did a Cancer Society walk for life, and we had a dunking booth. Mm-hmm. And everybody was throwing the baseballs, and Amber gets a soccer ball, and she's going to kick the ball to dunk the guy. And I'm pretty sure you were successful. And I
don't remember if I did or not. But
yeah, but it was.
See, that goes back to that competitive nature. I like to compete, and I really like to surprise people. I got a chip on my shoulder. I think I'm always trying to prove people wrong. I honestly think that doing college soccer, that was a lot of of what that was. I wasn't the all-star athlete in high school or on my college team, but I could do it. I knew I could do it. Maybe I just needed to prove it to myself, So I did it. I did it for 3 years. My fourth year of college, actually, I did quit soccer because of laboratories. That was a really tough decision, but I had so many labs. I had to make a decision. I wasn't going to get to play because I wasn't able to practice. But
Do you think that anything that you learned during those 3 years that it helped you get through grad school, or
oh
any
yeah,
of them?
yeah, for sure. I think that the first big lesson is time management, right? Because I was so busy in undergrad, it was unbelievable. I didn't work during the school year, but I was always taking like 18 hours, and I was playing college soccer and involved in clubs, and I was busy all the time. So that was like my baseline, was that my baseline expectation was to be busy this many hours a week, and so I think automatically that transfers to grad school, where you have to be self-regulated and work a certain number of hours in the lab. It was still a struggle when I got to grad school, though, because I wasn't enjoying my work in the lab. So making myself do that work, was really difficult. But yeah, I'd definitely say that. Functioning as a team, of course, you have to learn to talk with people. You have to learn to work with people. You have to learn to tell people when you're not happy.
Right. Well, and I think you just made kind of a good point about you don't always have fun in the lab. In fact, most of it is not the most fun. It can be a lot of repetitive or just
Yeah.
very anal work, which I guess is sort of analogous to the hard practice you put into soccer, which is much longer than the game or the little bit of time you get to handle a ball.
Yeah. That's a great analogy. Yeah, I like that. That's yeah.
Well, that's good. I wanted to touch that because I know it was a big part of your life for many years, and I thought we could find some parallels between that and science,
Yeah.
which may sort of connect with some of the athletes or, young people out there that may think they want to be an athlete, but they don't know which way to go. And sometimes you can do both.
Yeah, you can.
So you had a professor or somebody that helped kind of told you about grad school?
Yeah, who encouraged me to go to grad school. Yeah, Dr. Scales. He was our genetics professor. So I went to Midwestern State University. They didn't offer PhD programs. They did offer masters. I think at that time it wasn't in any molecular science. It was a life science degree, but I think it was in like organisms, level biology. So I really couldn't continue there. And I was also really interested in leaving my hometown. That was something that I always wanted to do, was to go live somewhere else. So I didn't feel like I was capable of doing it in undergrad. Definitely my parents had a role in that. They had always told me, we can't afford college. You have to put yourself through college, and you should live here because it's cheaper and we'll feed you and do your laundry. And they did all that. And it worked out pretty well. But by the time grad school came around, I really wanted to go somewhere else. So I did apply to a couple of places, all in Texas, not that far away. But I do think that the reason I chose to apply to grad school and not to medical school was because of Dr. Scales telling me that I could do that. I did sit for the MCAT. I still didn't ever turn in my applications. I never completed the process. So it's interesting. I don't know. A lot of times you're making these big life-changing decisions, and you don't have to have some kind of grand scheme to it, right? You just kind of float through life and do it. As long as you keep doing something, you're going to be okay, right? And I think that was probably also part of it, is that I first applied for a master's program, not a PhD program, because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And it was like my safety net in the back of my head. Well, if I don't really want to do this, I'll apply for medical school when I'm done with my master's, right? But I actually ended up transferring from the master's program to the PhD program. They let me do that before completing my degree. So that was interesting.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And yeah, the key, you always did push. You were always pushing. You were floating a little bit, I guess, but it was a directional float, I would say.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. I think we've covered some really good stuff so far. Okay, I'm going to ask you well, I'll have to ask this one. Did you know any scientists or PhDs in Wichita Falls, or just
Not,
college?
yeah, not until college. No. I mean, I had biology teachers, in high school. One in particular who I had kind of, I guess, envisioned or idolized as a scientist. I mean, he was a scientist, no doubt. He was a teacher, but we did science in his lab, but that's it. No, I didn't know anyone with a PhD at all. Yeah.
Nope. Yeah, I think that's a key point for the people that I want to reach, that to hear these
Yeah.
stories.
Oh, even other graduate degrees, I think at that level, like, other people with professional degrees, like MDs or DOs or law degrees, like that are kind of, the same level of graduate education. I only knew a few of them. They were like parents of people who I went to school with, and boy, did they seem so far removed from my world, right? Like, it was almost like, yeah, like they were in a different echelon of society, So, no, I never got close to anyone like that, Never any physicians either.
Yeah, I guess you could imagine, because Wichita Falls, it is somewhat agricultural, and then the Air Force, so they were almost the fish out of water, maybe.
They lived in the country club and, drove Mercedes, and it was like they were our elite in our community,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, well, I just want to do a little bit about UNT. I mean, you're working at UNT Health Science Center, but you went to grad school. You're working at UNT Health Science Center / TCU, the new medical school that they are now opening. And I guess this is the first year?
Next year will be the first year. Next fall.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, what will you be doing this year?
Developing the curriculum.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I guess you're going to have a lot of committee meetings and,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. I know how fun that is.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I was just going to ask about UNT Health Science Center because we both went there, and I don't know if we can cut this out if we decide not to keep this in the interview, but what would you improve about your grad school? Not your experience, but the grad school. Now that you've been to a couple places where you worked and you've had a little bit of experience working, yeah, do you have any critiques for it?
Well, I think that when you finally start working as a faculty member around other faculty members, it like suddenly becomes clear how human and fallible they are. And it had never been that way before, right? Because as a student, you're really intimidated by them. They do seem to have it all together, like every move they make is intentional, and well, that's just simply not the case, right? I mean, I think that I definitely would have a different perspective if I went back to school now, right? I would see them as human. I would expect and forgive mistakes more, for sure. Understand how busy they are, and that they probably realize that some of the things they decide to do, choices they make in the classroom or in managing the lab, they probably know that they're not ideal or the best choices, or even the choices they want to make, but maybe they're limited by time and resources, I mean, yeah, so maybe I'd be a little more forgiving. Not that I was really one to push. Well, maybe I was. I don't know. Maybe I am one to push authority. I
You
don't
might have
think
been a pusher.
I'm a pusher, but it's not that I viewed anyone particularly negatively. You know, it's just I just like to have ideas and I like to talk about them.
Right.
so,
Right.
um, so that's one thing I think that you definitely feel like everything is planned or almost preordained or something when you're a student, and it's not until you're a faculty member that you realize how much you're just like 1 week ahead of the students, like literally just 1 week or a few minutes ahead.
I think you brought up a good point that not only goes for school and professors, but also like parents. That moment when you realize that they were pretty much winging it, and
Yeah,
it's a little bit scary, but it's also comforting,
yeah,
because you don't, yeah, we don't necessarily know what we're doing, but I
yeah,
guess neither did they. We're all just trying to figure it out.
yeah. It's kind of scary the first time it hits you as an adult when you realize that the entire organization is like that. Not UNT in particular, but all colleges, right? I mean, we really
All
are
colleges.
just a group of humans running an organization with just millions of pieces moving at the same time, right? Which slows everything down. Everything is so slow. It's really hard to change something when you're already moving, for sure. But I commend UNT on the amount of growth I've seen since I've been here. I mean, just the fact that they were willing to reach out and make a collaborative agreement with TCU to create this medical school that they wanted for so long, I think is really commendable. And likewise, the TCOM faculty. So TCOM is the College of Osteopathic Medicine that's here, and they award DO degrees, whereas our new School of Medicine will award MD degrees. And there's been a little bit of a contentious relationship on and off between the two sides, right? And just the fact that TCOM's been so accepting, I think that there must have been, some sort of societal change, some sea change in the way they're thinking about this partnership. I felt welcomed since I've been here. If I can improve anything, though, in colleges in general, I would say that we need to be able to try things.
Yeah, it might not have been a bad.
Did you go ahead? I'm sorry. Did I skip?
Hey, hey, Amber, I'm sorry. Hold on one
Yeah.
second. It's not. It's way lagging. I don't know why. Yeah, it did. Maybe I'll call you right back.
Sure. Are you going to be able to save it like that?